the moment, the moment I saw this scene right here. I was like, oh, I'm absolutely going to love this show. Because the books, they were pretty gay, but they were gay in a subtexty way. But these vampires over here, oh, they are fucking. And welcome to my safe game, and thank you guys so much for joining me here for another video on the Black Gay Comic Geek channel. Hey, if this is your first time checking me out, how's it going? My name is Michael. I call myself the Black Gay Comic Geek, and I always say the things that I love to talk about on my channel, just like it says on my shirt, let me get on my tippy toes, has blood, sex, gore, and magic, or any variation of the four. So I like to talk about superheroes, I like to talk about video games, I like to talk about comic books, I like to talk about action movies, I like to talk about horror movies, I like to talk about fantasy, and I like to talk about sci-fi. And of course, I'm a black gay comic geek, so I like to talk about black representation and queer representation. So if that's something that you're interested in, if you like the shirt, if you think it's a cool shirt, do me a favor, support your boy. Check out my merch store in the link below, and also hit that subscribe button, become one of my safe Gaveneers. And also you can do me a favor by watching this video to the end for the watch time, liking this video for the algorithm, watch, share, like, comment, interact on this video for the all gay rhythm. Guys, I cannot emphasize enough, because like sometimes I'll get like, maybe for example, I'll get like 300 views on a video and maybe only like 50 likes. Can't emphasize enough. If you support your boy, do me a favor. Again, watch for the watch time, like for the algorithm, share, comment, interact for the all gay rhythm. Let's get this video out there, my channel out there, so I can continue to grow. But yeah, if you've already seen my non-spoiler review for Interview with the Vampire, if you haven't, you click the link up here, because hopefully you've watched the show if you're on this video, because we are talking full spoilers. I mean, I already spoiled kinda the intro, so you've already been warned. So yeah, spoilers for Interview with the Vampires. And I believe the first 2 episodes dropped on AMC Plus, so I guess I'll talk about the first 2 episodes. And so yeah, I want to once again say thank you to AMC and AMC Plus, because I did finally get to watch, and I did get the opportunity to see the first 5 episodes of Interview with the Vampire, which both is great and kind of sucks, because now I'm done with the 5 episodes and I'm like, okay, I need episode 6, I need episode 7, and I gotta wait basically 5 weeks to get the rest. I'm just like, no, I need more. But with that said, you see the interaction between Louis and David Malloy. Louis is hiding out in Dubai and spending a considerable amount of money to basically hide his identity so that he can continue to live in modern day society without raising any suspicions. Like, he has his windows tinted in a certain type of way where the UV rays of the light doesn't penetrate into his apartment, which he now calls his coffin, so he can still walk around kinda in the daylight. And I guess maybe if he wants to have meetings at his apartment, I mean, even though he said he doesn't really invite anybody there. And also, not even just that, but we do get to see a lot more of David Malloy and learn more about David Malloy and interact with his character more than we did in the books. And I like that, because it adds more more depth to the character of David Malloy. We're also not just seeing Louis' life in the past, but we're also seeing Louis' life in the present, which is something we didn't really get in the book. I mean, for the most part, I didn't read most of the Vampire Chronicles, but I did kind of like read up on it. And I know most of her other books just follow Lestat. You get some of Louis, but not a whole lot of Louis. So you don't really see a lot of him in the present day. For those of you out there that are Vampire Chronicles stans, correct me on that if I'm wrong, but I think most of her books always follow Lestat, except for like the book, The Vampire Armand. So jumping into the Interview with the Vampire, you see this new story takes place in 1910 New Orleans. in a place called Storyville, which is New Orleans' red light district, which I looked up was an actual real thing that did take place and did happen. And Louis basically the one running Storyville. She said that he owned 8 out of the 12 businesses on that street. And even though he's basically the one that's running that part of New Orleans, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, he is still a black man. And so when he goes to Storyville and he finds out that there was a little kerfuffle, not even a word, but an incident at one of his brothels where one of his women beat up this man, the alderman, because he tried to, as she said, stick his dick in her ass. And she basically clocked like his whole brain was leaking. I was like, how is he still alive? But even despite that, like being the owner of everything, all that man, the alderman, all he saw was a black man. All he saw was a Negro. He didn't see a person that is contributing partially to his campaign, a person that kind of owns him in Louis DuPont de Lac. He just said, what did he say? He said, don't touch me, nigger. And it wasn't until Louis said, I'm Louis DuPont de Lac, that he was like, oh, my bad. Like, you got power. You're not just any regular black person. You're not just any regular nigger. You're a nigger with power. So let me back up a little bit, because like I said, Louis was funding a lot of his campaign, and Louis basically owns Storyville. And so that's something that still a lot of times happens to this day. Like, I remember there was a viral video that went around a while ago where a cop needlessly pulled over a black woman, or it was a black man, I don't remember. But then they found out that that black person was a judge, and they're like, oh, my bad. And I think that cop ended up getting in trouble because needlessly pulled over. And that happens time and time again. Like, how many times do you see stories, and sometimes it doesn't even matter what your power is, where people will get pulled over in military uniform and still harassed. Or hell, I remember Oprah talked about one time when she was still Oprah, how she went overseas to a shop and was like looking around, and she was still followed. And it's like, this is Oprah. You know she could buy this whole establishment, right? Or even if you think of the movie Celine, anything for Salinas, when played by J-Lo. And of course, obviously, I'm pretty sure that was based, even though it's a movie, I'm pretty sure that actually happened to her when she was followed, or like the woman thought that she couldn't afford the outfit. And it's like, you're talking to Celine, anything for Salina. Like, so no matter what time period it is, racism is still racism. 0 days without white nonsense. And also at the end of the day, despite all the power that he has, Louis can't really do anything about it. He gave the man another chance. It was like, hey, I'm gonna give you a chance to get yourself right. But it's like, what is he really gonna do? Because at the end of the day, he's still black, power or not. Like, in this part of New Orleans, he might have a little bit of clout and a little bit of power, but go outside of that area or interact with the rest of the state, interact with the rest of the world, and no power. And I mean, he even alluded to that where he said, like, this is the only place in New Orleans where I could have a business. I could be a businessman. And not only that, but I can help my people out as well. And speaking of his people, not all of his people are proud of the business venture that Louis has chosen to enter into, where we see his brother show up. And his brother is played by Stephen Norfleet. And that's another fine black man that's on this show. And like, look at this man. And I found out that the actor is actually gay in real life, but sadly, he's married. Congratulations to him. It's not like even if he was single, I would ever have a chance, but I'm just like, everybody's shacked up but me. But I'm like, I'ma still stare. Cause I went to his Instagram and you look at his shirtless photos, I was like, God damn, that man fine. But I say all that to say, just like I said in my non-spoiler review, right off the bat, this show was like instantly addressing Louis' blackness and what makes this show slightly different and what makes it an adaptation of Anne Rice's novel. Because in a lot of ways, in many ways, making Louis black does change a lot of the story, but at the essence, it's still mostly the same. And you got some people that would be upset about that, because I've seen, like, there are people that are just refusing to watch the show because of the changes. And then you got people like me that are like, hey, I'm curious. I was interested to see what they do and how they change it. And suffice to say, I'm really enjoying it. And I think the changes actually makes it more interesting. Makes Louis more interesting. It makes the dynamic between Louis and Lestat more interesting. It makes the story more interesting. Now, granted, it could all fall apart in the end, but as of right now, especially after seeing the first 5 episodes, I'm here for all of it. I will say though, there was a line, because Jacob Anderson is actually British and now he's trying to put on like an accent, like a Southern New Orleans kind of Cajun Creole accent. But like there was a moment where he was like, I didn't always identify as a homosexual man. It's different now. I was like, homosexual? What is that? I was like, I don't know if that was his like British trying to compete with his Creole. I was like, and he couldn't say homo without sounding British. But yeah, I was like, what is a homosexual? Like a hologram? What is that? But eventually when you get to the scene where Louis and Lestat met for the first time, like again, the chemistry between Reed and Jacob Anderson is electrifying. And then the way the camera was like, had this eerie quality when it would like be dead center as a close-up on Sam Reed as Lestat when he was talking to Louis, and Louis would kind of look at him like he was both disgusted, aroused, and also admiring. He even kind of said that, like I was both aroused or not. What did he say? I was admiring him and also annoyed by him, and I wanted to be him. Like you could see all of that in his face. And kudos to Jacob Anderson and Sam Reed for the act. Like the two of them, like I love the chemistry between these two actors. And then also like another thing that they kind of do on this show is, which is different from the book, is they have way more power as vampires in the show than they do in the book. And I believe Lestat can read minds in the books, and like I said, it's been a while since I read the first book. All I can go is go back to the movie where I remember where Lestat asked Louis to read somebody else's thoughts and he said he couldn't. And Lestat was just like, well, the dark gift affects all of us in different ways. Some of us get different abilities or whatever. Jump into episode 2, Louis and Lestat, they can both read minds, but because Lestat made Louis, they can't read they can't read each other. And then not only just that, but he has this like weird like Hiro Nakamura time stop ability, which I'm just like, that seems pretty damn powerful. I'm like, what is that? And also like, you know, being a vampire, he can move quicker than any human. And so that moment at the very end of this episode where like the guy was trying to run away in the church and you saw like he was in slow motion, but Lestat was walking normal pace and like it looked very eerie, but it was a cool ass shot. And I wish more shows and movies that deal with like super speed, they show it from that perspective more, because that looked pretty damn cool. Speaking of pretty damn cool, oh man, that sex scene between Louis and Lestat, I was like, as soon as they started kissing, I was like, oh yes, I am so glad that this show is going into the gayness of the relationship between Louis and Lestat, and it's not being subtext and it's all text. My one criticism regarding that, you know, I always gotta have my criticism. You're always gonna say it's not gay enough. That is kind of what I felt. That scene wasn't gay enough only because we didn't actually see them fucking. Like Lestat and and it was obviously implied that they had sex, but we saw Lestat drinking from Louis. We saw them making out, and then it cut to them eventually being done. So it's implied that they did have sex, but I wanted to actually see them having sex. Like from whether it's Lestat, you know, hitting it from the back or Louis hitting Lestat from the back, or maybe they take turns, flip flop. I wanted to see all of that happen. Because again, representation equals normalization. We always see heterosexual sex scenes all the time in these types of shows. But when it comes to the queer sex scene, and again, they showed a lot, but they didn't show enough for me. Speaking of enough, his brother had enough. In that scene that his brother and Louis were on the roof, and then he threw himself off the roof. Like, I knew that was gonna happen. Like, I was like, the whole time I was like, it's too quiet. Like, this scene is way too quiet. There's like nothing going on right now. Not in a bad type of way, but I was like, it's way too peaceful. These characters are way too happy right now. Something's about to happen. At first I thought he was gonna slip and fall off the roof, because I know in the book and in the movie, Louis' brother does die, and that's what causes him to go on this downward spiral of depression, which ends up attracting Lestat. But based on this show, Lestat was attractive way before that. But like, I knew his brother would eventually meet his end. And so I thought he was gonna slip and fall. But the fact that he threw himself off the roof like that, I was like, oh man. And I was like, and I was also sad because I'm still just like that. His brother is fine. I wanted to see more of his brother. But jumping to the end, because I did say I was going to talk about episode 2, like that final scene between Louis and Lestat, where Lestat basically brutalized and we know he has this issue with religion because that scene where he was invited to Louis' home and his brother was asking, is he religious? And he talked about how he did believe in God at one point. He wanted to be a priest at one point. But because of all the torture and things that he dealt with in his personal life, he was like, what kind of God would allow something like this to happen? So no, he does not believe in God anymore. He finds the idea of religion abhorrent. And I feel that when you think about like all the stuff that's happening in the world today and just like what kind of God would allow climate change, children to starve in the world, etc. I'm not going to get into all that, but I'm just like, I definitely feel that. But yeah, that whole scene, that whole monologue, the whole eeriness of the scene, it was both beautiful and eerie. It had this dream-like quality, but also it was a nightmare because you had these dead bodies around it. There's a man that had these piercing, otherworldly eyes and fangs and blood all over him, but at the same time, still looking like an angel and a devil at the same time. And so that moment, he was like, Lestat just had a way of disarming me. Like, you felt all the emotions and saw all the emotions in Louis' face. I'm like, both of them should get an Oscar nomination for that. I mean, not an Oscar, this is a TV show, an Emmy nomination for that final scene alone. And I was like, that is how you do a premiere. And so we jump to episode 2, and Louis is now a vampire, and he's learning as a fledgling vampire how to hunt, how to kill, how to find his prey. He's learning that he now can't go out into the sunlight, and the way they do like the skin peeling and things like that when he goes into the sun, like it's very slow in terms of like vampire, because like some mythology, like it's very instant. Like in Buffy, it's very instant. The moment they go into the sun, they burst into flames and things like that. But in some, like Lestat, almost, I mean, or Louis kind of look like he's developing leprosy or whatever when he goes into the sun. So now he knows he can't go out to the sun anymore. And the moment he goes into that bar to like hunt, he wants to go after the sailor, the man. He's like, oh, prettiest girl in the ball you're hunting after. But then they go after the guy who's clearly knew what he was going to Louis and Lestat's house for. He was going there to have sex, but he ended up dying. And this is where you learn more about the vampire power and the mind reading ability. And I like the moment where he was like, I don't really read human minds anymore because like human thoughts are mundane. It all boils down to 3 things. I want food, I want sex, and I want to go home. And I'm like thinking to myself, I'm like, do all my thoughts boil down to those 3 things? Probably add money on top of that, but like, what do you want money for? You want money for food. You want money for your home. And I'm always thirsty and talk about, like I was just talking about how Jacob Anderson is fine and his brother, played by Stephen Norfleet, is fine. So I want sex. But speaking of, again, the show really dealing with the dynamic between Louis and Lestat, like I love the moment where David Malloy called him out when Louis was like, in the dark, we were equals. And he's like, bullshit, the white master and the slave, but y'all are equals. Not really the case. Like, they don't see you as equals. You're not treated as equals. But I also like in the fact that, and it also kind of creates a limitation in terms of television, because in the books, they do pretty much travel the world. But based in these first 5 episodes, it's really all just takes place in New Orleans, which also kind of justifies Louis having the power and the riches that he has, because he can't go anywhere else. But then, so it kind of does make it somewhat, because I was like, my biggest concern is like Louis and Lestat traveling or getting into these rich parties and things like that. Like, it creates an issue where no matter how powerful Louis is, at the end of the day, he's still black and Lestat is white. So no matter how much money Louis has, Lestat is always going to be up here. But keeping him in Storyville, in this part of New Orleans, it kind of makes it a little bit more palatable how they could, there's still this dynamic between Louis and Lestat, but it's a little closer to this than it would be in any other part of the world. But and even with that, they still address it, make it realistic in this world where Louis and Lestat, they go to the opera and he said he has to pretend to be like his footman or whatever. But when the lights go down, he sits down and they enjoy the opera together as lovers. But before the lights go up, he has to stand back up and pretend to be basically his servant again. Like, it's the little nuances, which also, like I said, it makes the relationship between the two of them a little bit more interesting. But I also thought that scene was funny. The guy who was singing, like, he was singing so off key, and it pissed Lestat off so much that he went and killed the guy. But before he killed him, he made him sing the music. Like, slowly torturing the man is like, you're gonna sing this note right. And granted, as a person that's saying, like, it is painful when you have somebody singing the wrong note. Like, the level of cringe that you feel, like you just can't help going like that because it hurts your ear. So imagine being a vampire who with heightened senses. I'm pretty sure it hurts him even more. But I was like, especially, I mean, Louis did say he knew the person that wrote the opera. But I was like, if I was a vampire and somebody was singing wrong, I would probably be Lestat at that moment. And of course, they even address the homophobia, like we see his mother played by the great Rae Dong Chong, and he's reading her mind, and he's talking about his fingernails, the fashion, the glasses, some men like that. So she's always suspected that her son was queer. And this is back when the term queer was used as a pejorative, where unlike in today's society, you know, the idea of using it, taking the power back from that, and now queer is seen as an umbrella term for the LGBTQ community, whereas before, if you were called queer, like queer was the equivalent of being called the faggot, basically. I'm like, hopefully this video does not get demonetized with me saying the word, but I'm like, context, YouTube, context. I mean, I am gay. It's not hate speech. And Louis makes reference to that in the first episode. It's like, let alone being a black man in this world, but like, I can't be an openly gay Negro man in this world. And even kind of showed, like, at this point, he not only is the richest guy in this area of New Orleans, owns the majority of the businesses on these streets, paying off a lot of the politicians and a lot of the cops. Now he's also a supernatural being with power and speed and agility and the power to read minds. And even still, he has to lightly walk around the idea, like he still doesn't have more power than a regular white man in this society. Like that moment where he was like trying to sell or like start a business with the guy, and the guy was like, he touched him, he's like, oh, you're a smart Negro. Like, I was just like, kill him. Kill him. And yeah, it's like, even despite that, he still has to navigate. There's nothing more powerful than racism in the country, even when you are the most powerful person in the room. And like I said, all these new dynamics that Louis has to navigate, being a black man now in this adaptation, I think, like I said, makes the story way more interesting, way more compelling, makes Louis way more compelling than, because honestly, Louis is kind of bland in the books. And it's also why I said, I feel like if black people had powers like X-Men or anything like that, a lot more of us, due to white superiority disorder, as one of my mutuals would say on TikTok, because of that, I feel like a lot more of us would be like Magneto than we would be Charles Xavier, for example. I know I would be. I would totally be on my villain shit if I had powers in this world. And eventually we get to the end of the episode. David Malloy's talking about his wife and how she had different color eyebrows and she would try to dye it, so I guess she wouldn't stand out and look different, but he always liked it where she left it alone, embracing who she is. And I think that's kind of what I took the final moment to be, because it kind of ended on like a weird somber note where after he said that, he closed the laptop and they're just eating in silence. And I think that's basically what that is. It's like, embrace who you are. Like, you're different, you're a killer, whatever. Like, that's who you are. Stop trying to be what you're not or trying to justify. I don't know. That's just how I took it. But it was a little bit of a weird ending. But the show was incredible. Like, I love this show. Like I mentioned in my non-spoiler review, I don't like to rate shows before they end, but based on like what I see so far, like I'm giving the show a blockbuster. Like, again, it could completely fall on its face by the end. I could come back and be like, oh yeah, episodes 6 and 7 were terrible. But based on the first 5, my favorite are the first 3, to be perfectly honest, but I still like episodes 4 and 5. And so, yeah, Interview with the Vampire. If you guys, I don't have really anything else to say. So, what did you guys think about episodes 1 and 2, Interview with the Vampire? Like I say in every video, hopefully you made it towards the end of this video. Hit the like button, share, comment, interact for the all gay rhythm. Let me know all of your thoughts about the show. Are you excited about this show? And are you here for the show? Did the show exceed your expectations? Is it lower than your expectations? Did you not like these first 2 episodes? Let me know all of your thoughts. Also, if you can, also for those of you, if this is your first time checking out my channel, please check out the other videos on my channel. If you like what you see, please subscribe for more and hit that bell notification button so you're alerted every single time I post a new video. And tell your friends, families, and neighbors about my channel to help me continue to grow. And as always, I will catch you guys next time.